Darksiders is an action-adventure game set in a post-apocalyptic world. This game is in the same vein as Devil May Cry and Soul Reaver. This was the first game developed by Vigil Games, and it was published by THQ. The art direction in Darksiders is one of the strongest aspects of this game. The art direction of this game was headed by, and I'm probably going to butcher this, Joe Madureira. He's responsible for drawing a few Deadpool comics and a slew of X-Men comics. Because of his influence, Darksiders has a very unique look to it that sets it apart from other games. In terms of raw graphical power, this game is no slouch either. It not only looks good in an artistic sense, but also in a technical one. The world is vibrant and colorful despite being in a post-apocalyptic setting. The game looks especially nice during the FMV sequences, which actually look really breathtaking. The only thing visually I have to complain about this game is that sometimes when you do a scripted final blow on an enemy, it could have been done a little more cinematically, which honestly isn't even a knock on the graphics, but more so the presentation. Otherwise, it's a very good looking game. It's not quite the same level as some other higher budgeted games, but it still holds its own regardless. The music for Darksiders is quite epic. A lot of it is orchestrated, which suits the game nicely. The songs range from banging drums and trumpets and opera chanting to other tracks which are more slow and serene and incorporate more violin. The music in this game, for the most part, is very atmospheric, and it fits great for the post-apocalyptic setting. The voice acting in this game is also top-notch. Special mention goes to War, who was voiced by Liam O'Brien, who is one of my favorite voice actors. And another special mention goes to Mark Hamill, who lends his voice to the Watcher, which, by the way, sounds eerily similar to his performance as the Joker, which is by no means a bad thing at all. Besides them, however, everyone else performs their roles well, and I can't really think of any weak performances. The entire cast of characters was all voiced spectacularly. Darksiders stars our protagonist War, who is one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Our modern Earth got caught in the middle of a war between heaven and hell. War thought he heard the call, and he answered it. Unfortunately, War was wrong, and now he's being punished by the Council. War must now clear his name. The story of Darksiders isn't anything that's really bad, but it's not anything to write home to mom about either. There are some cool and interesting characters here and there, but really no one stands out all that much. War himself isn't very interesting either. He just seems to be like your typical brooding protagonist. The Watcher is a character that's tasked with constantly looking over War and making sure he's doing what the Council wants him to do. In terms of gameplay though, all he does is give advice. He's kind of a funny character from time to time, and is one of the more interesting ones, but overall this is a game where the story is not really a focus. Some of the cutscenes are cool to watch, but in general you really won't be caring about what's going on. However, this is clearly not what the game's about, but rather the game's gameplay. In Darksiders, you explore a fairly sizable world, slaying hordes of angels and demons in the process. War has an assortment of different weapons and abilities that are either found through the course of the game, or by purchasing them in the store. At the beginning of the game, War has a pretty small list of abilities, and this can make the start of the game a bit boring for some. However, it doesn't take too long before War starts developing, growing more powerful, and becomes much more fun to use. The combat in this game is reminiscent to Devil May Cry, in that pulling off combos is all about your timing. You can also string attacks together by switching weapons mid-combo. War gets three main close-range weapons in the game: his sword, the scythe, and the gauntlet. His sword is his main form of attack and can't be unequipped. The scythe and gauntlet, however, are his secondary weapons and can be switched back and forth. Each weapon levels up individually through use, and does more damage as a result. This is only for your melee weapons, however, and not any of your ranged weapons. You can also find different enhancements throughout the world that will give your weapons different properties. Some of these work better for certain weapons. I like this as it added a nice extra bit of depth, since the right enhancement on a weapon can actually make a difference in battle. Ranged weaponry, for the most part, doesn't play too heavily into the gameplay, mostly only for puzzles. War can use some spells, but aside from his Blade Geyser spell, most of them are buff spells that serve to make War himself stronger for the duration of the spell. Finally, the strongest ability in War's arsenal is his Chaos form. Similar again to Devil May Cry, when War hits or gets hit by enemies, his Chaos meter will gradually fill. This will allow him to transform and become extremely powerful for a short period of time. Every time you kill an enemy or break objects in the world, War will get souls. These souls serve as the game's currency. These will allow War to purchase new fighting abilities as well as different spells and items from the game's shop. Speaking of the shop also works as a shortcut of sorts in the game world. Similar to Soul Reaver, there are different shops all over the world that you can find. When you find them, you can travel back and forth between them throughout the game world. Also, much like Soul Reaver, the world is filled with hidden nooks and crannies that require abilities that you obtain throughout the game. You may see a blue crystal or something that you can't seem to do anything about at first. But when you progress in the game, you can come back and get what you missed. The game also has Lifestone and Wrath Shards scattered around the world. Much like other games that implement this feature, you can find these pieces. When you get enough of them, it will increase War's health bar, as well as his magic meter. Later on in the game, you can even get to ride on War's horse Ruin, which is pretty cool, but honestly it does feel like a wasted opportunity. If the world was bigger and more expansive, it could have worked better, but a lot of the areas in the game don't allow you to summon him, and even when you can, most of the areas actually feel very cramped. The game also sports some minor platforming, puzzle solving here and there, but it's nothing that's ever really complex, or requires deep thought. Overall, the gameplay is very solid. If I had to judge the combat alone, I'd say it's above average compared to your typical action game, but nothing that really stands out compared to some of the greats. However, the exploration aspect of the game helps weigh itself out, I feel. It really is honestly a lot of fun just to explore this unique world, see all the vistas, find new items and abilities, and see War slowly grow more powerful as a result. The boss fights in this game are also pretty cool too. There are some memorable fights, but my biggest issue is that there isn't a health bar during these fights to gauge how well you're doing, or if you're doing the right thing. It's actually not too big of a deal. Most of the time it is fairly obvious, but there are times where it isn't, and can be a bit bothersome. Otherwise, the gameplay is just very solid. Darksiders is an all-around well-made game. The graphics and music in this game are pretty fantastic. Story-wise, it's nothing special, but nothing bad either. And of course, the game itself is fun to play, and will keep you busy for a while, as this is a lengthy game. If you're a fan of action games, and if you're a fan of adventure games, then you'll probably enjoy Darksiders. This has been Shintai, everyone. Take it easy.